Today's StarCraft 2 history is going to be about a small segment in time spanning across 2012. It's the Coach Choya and his GSTL victory, so to speak. And the reason I wanted to talk about this briefly is because FXO wasn't a team that was necessarily had all the best skill compared to the other teams. They had one superstar player in Lenok, one very good team league player in Gumiho, and Choya himself was just a coach. But the way they set up the games, the way they played out, the various scenarios always impressed me, especially in the all-kill format, and that's why I rate Choya as one of the better coaches in StarCraft 2, just in terms of winning the GSTL. It's hard to figure out if somebody's good at development or somebody's good at the other parts of the coaching aspect. And the reason I'm talking about Choya is because FXO was incredibly successful in GSTL that year, and FXO as an org originally started as like a foreigner based team, but then they moved to Korea for one of the GSTL seasons. Famously, they had QXC, All Kill, IM, but soon after they'd buy out the Foyu clan, and the Foyu clan was the team led by Choya. And Choya had this belief, this dream that he would somehow make the StarCraft 2 team a professional organization along the lines of Brood War, but it was probably never going to happen. The viewership and the sponsorship was never there in Korea, so nice try, but it didn't really work out for him. But the FXO, when he was leading this FXO team, it was actually very successful in the team leagues. And one of the reasons was because he was probably the best at using himself, at setting up Gumiho and Lenok to basically clear up ace rounds towards the final end, and using like the rest of his players as basically snipers. And the way he used them as snipers was because it's an all-kill format where it's like, oh, winner stays on. You could be able to figure out. You also get to choose the map, so you can have map specialists, or you can have a guy whose style perfectly counters whoever is playing at that time. And you see this in the first season in Group A, where like FXO is on the verge of elimination against Slayers. It's a best of 9 format, so basically you have to kill 5 of the opposing players and then you win. And so the series was tied up against Slayers, and Ryung had just beaten Oz. And what Choya does is he takes Calm Before the Storm and then cheeses out Ryung, because Ryung was very weak to like TVP cheese. Slayers then sends out MMA on Crossfire. Choya takes him out too in the exact same fashion, like a different type of cheese. And then in like desperation, they have to bring out Crank to PvP out Choya, but then that leaves a very easy win for Lenok to clean up in a ZVP. And that's kind of the formula of FXO, is they constantly set up counters or like very weird, odd types of players that had a variable chance to win in a best of 1, and then they try to take out each of the maps until you got Lenok to one of his better maps, and then Lenok would just clean up the game. And that's kind of how they kept playing it. And so they beat OGSTL in the next round, and then they finally lose to Prime in the playoffs, where they do the same thing, but this was like Marine King's Prime, so to speak, and they basically ran out of options like halfway through, because Byun, for whatever reason, decided to name himself Ghost King at this point, and was a very good TVP player. So near the end, like after Byun took out Lucky, Choya had only like 2 slots left, because Gumiho and ASD were already out, and those were like 2 of the Terrans that he more leaned on at the time. And he realized that he only had like 3 choices: himself, Oz, or Lenok. And Oz was Oz had lost to Ryung in PvT, and Oz's PvT was like a bit overrated at the time. And so Choya basically tries to send himself out to try to cheese Byun out. Doesn't work, and so they're left with Lenok, who has to like clean up the rest of the team, but he isn't able to do it because Lenok is definitely strong enough to beat Byun, but Marine King was a harder player to beat. Like I said, one of the players I consider like part of the second generation of champions, and Marine King closes that out. But it's still an impressive run by FXO, and they only build on that in the coming season. In Season 2, they play against let's see here. In Season 2, I definitely know in the finals they played against Slayers, but let's see who else they played against. Played against TSL, didn't work out for them. Basically got shined, and Shine was there are 2 shines in StarCraft 2, and you're not going to hear much about either of them in my series because neither of them ever became relevant. The first shine was from Brood War, who was a cheeser, but he had some very odd and fun builds that could turn into an odd macro game. And then there's the other shine who was like a generic macro player, and he was very good in team leagues. He was very good in up and down groups. He was very good in Code A, but could never get beyond that. And so, because this is a team league, because it was Shine, because it was we're getting closer to the Brood Lord Infestor era, he kind of wins out. But FXO is able to beat Startail with a new player with Tier, who is known as Hurricane later. But basically, this guy was a bit hyped up to be a good Protoss player. Never really came to fruition. Was in fact actually eliminated by Choya years later in a Code A qualifiers when they had split up as teammates. So that's about Hurricane in a nutshell. But he was pretty good in the team league. And then the final bit was against NS Hosa, where Gumiho gets a very, very easy kills against Tassadar, Seal, and Sculp. And then Jock G is able to bring it back with his own triple kill. And then it's another Jock G versus Leenock battle. It's a very fun game and very reminiscent of their GSL finals, but Leenock takes it in the end. And they go to the playoffs of that season. And see, the playoffs were... I forget who they played in the semifinals. MVP, it was MVP. And like I said, it's another example of basically FXO gets bailed out by Leenock. Actually, it's not a super clever thing by Choya, but basically, here's what happens: is between MVP and FXO, MVP's getting the upper hand in majority of the games, and so the score is 4-2. But the way the maps work out, basically they took out Ohana, which is a bad Zerg map. They took out Daybreak, which might be an okay-ish Zerg map, but it's not necessarily one that Leenock likes to play because it's a very static kind of map. Cloud Kingdom is more of a... Cloud Kingdom was pretty fair either way, but you had more of a chance of getting all-in by a Protoss player, which actually Finale does to take out Lucky. And Finale is, for those who don't know, Duck Duck, and Duck Duck might get a video of his own sometime. Antigua Shipyard is picked by Gumiho, and that's actually a pretty good Leenock map. Not sure why he chose that, but maybe he thought Gumiho could take out Finale. It didn't work out. And Toon Valley, bad Leenock map. Muspelheim, probably not that great of a map. But basically Leenock does bail them out. He wins on Whirlwind, wins on Metropolis, wins on Atlantis Station against Tails, Lure, and Dongwei-gu. And then in the finals, this is a very famous finals where Gumiho just straight up all kills Slayers. And definitely watched the final game. And the final game is, not the final game, the first game of that map, which is Gumiho versus MMA, because I think it's the second best game ever played in StarCraft 2 history. And it's an incredible matchup because of the way the two styles of Gumiho and MMA kind of clash against each other. Where, like I said, MMA is this very calculated drop multitask player, whereas Gumiho was a chaotic drop multitask player. So both of them constantly force each other to make constant reactions, decisions, and aggressive options, because in every decision making process, there's always a chance to go on the offensive, but there's a risk to that. But both of these players actually think in their minds that the offensive option is the better option, so it becomes a very fun, very hard series. And because Antigua Shipyard is a very closed-in map, it is constantly super tense as to where they go, what they do, and they're constantly shifting bases, they're constantly destroying each other's bases, they're constantly harassing, counterattacking, and positioning their armies. It's an incredible game. Still one of the best ever played. I don't really care what anybody says. I also think it's also one of the most highly skilled games ever played as well. in terms of what they could do, how they could do it, and I don't think it doesn't matter who you send back. There's not going to be any player that necessarily plays better in that style that they did. So that's my opinion. This is also an interesting run, the GSTL Season 2, because basically FXO is part of the reason as to, not part of the reason, but like they basically like broke Dongregu's heart when the Leenock takes out MVP in the semifinals, and then soon after this, like Slayers kind of breaks up, and like the entire Slayers MMA drama comes out. So it's an interesting point in time. And then the final season is Season 3. This is their final GSTL victory. It's a pretty solid one. Basically, but it takes them a bit of work to get there. Basically, in the group stages, at this point, basically, the team league is starting to die out just because, like, I'd say this is the point where it starts to decline, not die out, because there's like less teams that are in StarCraft 2, like they're breaking up because there's no money to speak of. But this is still a very good victory from FXO. They beat StarTale, and they do the same thing. Like I keep saying, like they set up Leenock to ace match, and then he ace matches against Squirtle, wins. And then against MVP, they set up like Gumiho to win, and he gets like a triple kill at the end. And then in the playoffs, let's see here, they play against StarTale again. Well, wait, no, that was the playoffs. Basically, FXO wins like another one. Part of it is because, like I said, Leenock's a great ace, and then Guiho comes out big again in the GSTL finals. But as for the games, I don't remember them being that great, to be honest, in this round. But it's still an impressive achievement, and basically that covers my thoughts about Choya as a coach and Choya a bit as a player. Where he was definitely a guy who he had a lot of flair as a coach, because he'd send himself in to play, and he'd actually have like legitimate reasons to do that, and he set himself up really well. The way he used his players was very smart, very clever, and that's why he deserved this small video about him in StarCraft 2 history, because his team kind of defines the GSTL in 2012. All right, see you guys later.